The oppressive atmosphere inside the mining colony reeked of sweat, iron, and relentless despair. Dull clanking echoed through the cavernous tunnels as shackled beings toiled under the watchful gaze of the overseers. They were called slaves, but not just any slaves. These were the Trithan, a race known across the galaxy for their unshakable endurance and formidable strength. Yet, under the rule of their reptilian masters, the Rilgath, they were reduced to mere laborers, stripped of dignity and hope. Until the humans arrived. The news spread through the colony like wildfire. Whispers, hurried and anxious, passed from cell to cell. A Terran vessel had landed on the desolate rock, and its crew, a ragtag team of misfit marines and renegades, claimed they had come to free the Trithan. Liberation was an idea so distant, it bordered on fantasy. Freedom had been buried under years of oppression. In the dark recesses of Tunnel 7G, Harlock, a towering Trithan with scales dulled by years of toil, leaned against his pickaxe. His companions, exhausted and skeptical, clustered around him. Freedom? One of them, a gaunt figure named Trell, scoffed. More likely they've come to steal from us like everyone else. Humans are no different. Maybe, Harlock murmured, rubbing a calloused hand over his chin. But I've heard strange things about humans. Strange and terrifying. The arrival of the human envoy shattered any lingering doubts. They came not with demands, but with an offer. Captain Elias Carter, a grizzled veteran with eyes that had seen too much, stood before the enslaved workers with his hands on his hips and an expression of defiant determination. "All right, listen up," he barked. "We're not here to start a fight unless you want one. We're here to give you a choice. You can keep breaking your backs for these overgrown lizards, or you can walk away free. But let me be crystal clear, if we fight, we're going all the way. And trust me, humans don't do half measures." The Rilgath overseers scoffed at the notion. Humans were small, weak, soft. They lacked the hardened scales, the venomous fangs, and the brutal efficiency of their reptilian overlords. But what the Rilgath didn't understand, could never understand, was that humans weren't governed by strength alone. They had something far more insidious: ingenuity. A test was proposed. One human against one Rilgath in combat, a challenge to prove their worth. The Rilgath champion, a towering brute named Crack, smirked as he loomed over Sergeant Kelly, the human representative. She was lean, wiry, and unimpressed. The fight lasted less than 2 minutes. Kelly sidestepped every sluggish blow with practiced ease. She delivered a single devastating punch to Crack's throat and watched him crumple like a sack of grain. The Trithan, watching from behind their chains, couldn't believe their eyes. "How did she do that?" Trell stammered. "Not strength," Harlock whispered. "Precision." The Rilgath were not amused. The overseers, furious and humiliated, tightened their grip. Punishments were meted out, chains were reinforced. But it was too late. The spark had been lit. Trithan eyes, long dulled with despair, now burned with something unfamiliar: hope. Elias knew better than to rely on morale alone. He and his team scoured the colony, analyzing security weaknesses, supply routes, and the psychological profiles of their reptilian adversaries. The Rilgath, for all their brute strength, were predictable. And predictable enemies were easy to dismantle. "We hit them where they don't expect it," Elias muttered over a makeshift holographic map. "Power supply, air filtration, food stores. They'll expect sabotage," Kelly pointed out. "Exactly. So we won't sabotage. We'll do something worse, we'll follow their rules." The plan was as audacious as it was baffling. Instead of rebellion, the humans introduced bureaucracy. Papers. Permits. Inspections. The Rilgath, unaccustomed to the labyrinthine horrors of human red tape, found themselves drowning in a sea of meaningless forms. Form 7A for oxygen distribution? "What nonsense is this?" growled Overseer Vrash. "Standard procedure," Elias said with a straight face, handing him a clipboard. The cracks widened. Trithan workers, once silent and obedient, started asking questions. Small acts of defiance sprouted, tools went missing, machinery mysteriously broke down. The Rilgath, too proud to acknowledge their control slipping, doubled down with threats and violence. Then the humans shifted tactics. They abandoned the rules entirely. You don't fight tyrants with weapons, Elias told Harlock one evening, sitting against the cool rock wall of the tunnels. You fight them with something they can't comprehend, chaos. And humans. We're the undisputed masters of it. The Rilgath quickly learned the meaning of psychological warfare. The humans staged ghost raids, planted false rumors, and turned the colony's tightly wound schedule into a tangled mess of confusion and paranoia. The overseers were constantly on edge, unable to predict when or where the next disruption would strike. Yet, it wasn't enough. Harlock, despite his growing admiration for the humans, remained wary. What happens when they push back? When they bring the full force of their army down on us? Elias grinned, his teeth flashing in the dim light. Then we do what humans do best, my friend. We improvise. The spark of rebellion was now a roaring flame. The Trithan, once docile, stood straighter. They no longer cowered at the sight of their overseers. And when the first Rilgath transport exploded under mysterious circumstances, they knew the war had truly begun. Deep within the colony, with alarms screaming and Rilgath forces scrambling to contain the growing insurrection, Elias turned to his team and smirked. Time to show them what heartless really means. The uprising swept through the mining colony like an electric current igniting dormant circuits, surging with relentless force through every tunnel and crevice. What had started as whispered hope was now an unstoppable force, fueled by the ingenuity of their human allies. The Trithan, once shackled by fear and obedience, found themselves emboldened by the sheer audacity of the humans' tactics. And the Rilgath? They were floundering, unaccustomed to enemies who fought with wit rather than brute strength. Elias and his team had embedded themselves within the workforce, passing on knowledge like smuggled contraband. They taught the Trithan how to subtly sabotage operations without raising suspicion, misaligning drill calibrations, rerouting energy flows, and planting fake maintenance reports that sent the Rilgath chasing phantoms. The key to chaos, Elias grinned one evening, crouching beside Harlock, is making them think everything's fine right until it's not. Their efforts bore fruit. Production lines faltered, cargo went missing, and key systems malfunctioned, leaving overseers scrambling. The once efficient operations of the Rilgath crumbled into disarray. But Elias knew it wasn't enough. The Rilgath had resources, reinforcements, and a deep-seated cruelty that wouldn't be swayed by mere inconvenience. And so, he pushed the rebellion further. Kelly led a team of Trithan to infiltrate the central control hub, relying on stolen access codes to slip past security. Their goal: cripple communications and sow further disorder. They moved silently, slipping past security unnoticed. "Stay sharp," Kelly whispered. "We get in, plant the data spike, and get out. No delays." Harlock, now a trusted leader among his people, nodded grimly. "We will not fail." As Kelly inserted the data spike into the console, alarms blared without warning. "We've been compromised," she hissed, drawing her weapon. "Harlock, cover our exit." The escape turned chaotic. Rilgath forces poured in with overwhelming force. Though the humans and Trithan fought fiercely, the odds were against them. Elias, monitoring from a secure hideout, grimaced at Kelly's desperate call over the comms. "Elias, we're pinned down, need an exit." Thinking fast, Elias triggered an emergency shutdown of ventilation systems, plunging half the facility into darkness. It worked. Kelly and her team slipped away, battered but alive. "Nice trick," Kelly panted as she regrouped with Elias. "Remind me to buy you a drink if we ever get out of here." But the Rilgath were not to be underestimated. Overseer Vrash, a hulking brute with burning eyes, issued a brutal crackdown. "Any sign of rebellion, and your suffering will multiply tenfold," he snarled. "Your human saviors cannot protect you." Executions, the acrid stench of burning refuse, and the gnawing ache of empty stomachs wore down the workers' spirits. Relentless patrols cast long, menacing shadows across the tunnels, and whispers of despair curled through the air like smoke, suffocating any remaining hope. Elias watched, fists clenched, as hope flickered in the faces of the oppressed. "They're scared," Harlock admitted, his scales dull with exhaustion. "We've come so far, but fear is a powerful weapon. Elias exhaled slowly. Then we take that weapon away. The humans escalated their psychological warfare. Graffiti mocking the overseers appeared overnight, workers chanted resistance slogans, and holograms projected fabricated messages of an impending Terran invasion. Fear, once the Rilgath's tool, now turned against them. As tensions rose, Kelly approached Elias with a grim look. They're calling in reinforcements. If we don't act soon, we'll be buried under an army. Elias nodded. Then we cut the head off the snake. Vrash has to go. The plan was reckless, but desperation called for boldness. A high-stakes mission to infiltrate the Rilgath command center and eliminate Vrash was set. Harlock and Elias led the charge, knowing failure meant death. Under the cover of another staged power failure, they moved. As they crept through the corridors of the command center, every breath felt heavier, and their pulses quickened with the weight of the moment. They navigated the dim corridors, avoiding patrols, and finally reached the overseer's chamber. There stood Vrash, looming over a console, his eyes narrowing at the sight of the intruders. "Fools," he spat. "You think your pathetic resistance can break us?" Elias raised his weapon, steady. "We're not here to break you. We're here to end you." The confrontation erupted into a furious clash. Harlock's strength met Rilgath brutality, while Elias struck with precise efficiency, dodging and countering with practiced skill. The fight raged, but in the end, Elias delivered the final shot, sending Vrash sprawling. The command center was theirs. And with it, the rebellion had taken its most significant step toward victory. As they regrouped and planned their next move, Harlock looked to Elias, his eyes filled with newfound determination. "We can win this. We will win this." Elias, blooded but resolute, wiped a trickle of blood from his brow and nodded. "We're not stopping now. Not after this." The rebellion was no longer a mere whisper in the dark, it was a tidal wave crashing through the colony, unstoppable and relentless. The fall of Overseer Vrash had sent shockwaves through the Rilgath command structure, leaving them scrambling to re-establish control. Elias remained cautious, knowing that victory was never simple and the battle was far from over. Victory was never simple, and the Rilgath had more to lose than just a single leader. "They're regrouping," Kelly reported, crouching beside Elias in the shadows of a maintenance shaft. Her eyes were sharp, scanning the movement of enemy patrols below. "We've rattled them, but they're bringing in reinforcements. Heavily armed ones." Elias exhaled slowly, his mind already running scenarios. "Then we hit them before they get comfortable again." "Harlock, how's morale?" The Trithan leader, his scales glistening under the dim lighting, gave a firm nod. "We are ready. Fear has turned to resolve. We will not go back." The plan was simple in theory: disrupt the incoming reinforcements, sabotage their supply lines, and spread further confusion through coordinated strikes. But Elias knew the execution would be anything but simple. The Rilgath were adapting, tightening their defenses, and preparing for a prolonged engagement. The first strike hit with the force of a sudden storm, quick, devastating, and unrelenting. A convoy carrying weapons and rations never made it to the central depot. Harlock's team ambushed it in a narrow passageway, using the very tunnels that had once imprisoned them to their advantage. Explosions echoed through the colony, sending a clear message: the slaves were no longer under control. But the Rilgath retaliated hard. They unleashed heavily armed shock troops, larger, more disciplined, and armed with plasma weaponry that cut through rock and flesh alike. The once quiet colony turned into a battleground, with skirmishes erupting across every sector. For every Rilgath patrol they took down, more seemed to take its place. "We're losing ground," Harlock growled, frustration clear in his voice as they ducked behind a collapsed support beam. "They are too many." "No," Elias said, wiping sweat from his brow. "We're not losing ground, we're buying time." "Kelly, status on the explosives?" "Set and ready," she replied, holding up a detonator. "Give the word." Elias scanned the battlefield, where flickering emergency lights carved jagged shadows through the turmoil. Then he pressed the detonator. A thunderous roar shook the colony as several critical corridors collapsed, cutting off the Rilgath reinforcements and isolating their forces. "Now we move," Elias barked, leading his team through the debris, striking quickly and disappearing just as fast. Guerrilla tactics, hit and run, the kind of warfare humans thrived on. And yet, the Rilgath refused to break. Hours stretched into days, exhaustion creeping into their bones. Supply lines were stretched thin, and the Trithan, despite their resolve, were not trained soldiers. Fear began to creep back into their eyes. "We can't hold out forever," Kelly said quietly, pulling Elias aside. "We're running low on everything: food, ammo, morale. If we don't end this soon." Elias knew she was right. They needed a decisive blow, something that would shatter the Rilgath's will to fight. And he had an idea. "We take the command core," Elias said. "Their central system. If we shut it down, everything falls apart. Communications, security, environmental controls, it all goes down." Harlock's eyes widened. "That place is guarded by their elites. No one has ever breached it." "Then it's a good thing we're not just anyone," Elias said, a grin tugging at his lips. "Get the team ready." Shrouded in darkness, the infiltration team advanced with measured steps, their breaths held in anticipation. The command core was buried deep within the colony, heavily fortified and nearly impenetrable. But humans had a way of making the impossible possible. They bypassed outer security using stolen Rilgath credentials, slipping through the checkpoints unnoticed. As they reached the final door, however, alarms blared. "We've been made," Kelly shouted, drawing her weapon. "No turning back now." The battle inside the command core was unlike anything they'd faced before. The Rilgath elites fought with a brutal efficiency that tested every ounce of their resolve. Harlock and his warriors held the line, while Elias and Kelly pushed forward toward the core's control center. "Cover me," Elias shouted, diving toward the console. His fingers flew across the unfamiliar interface, sweat dripping down his brow. Come on, come on." A plasma blast scorched the wall beside him, forcing Kelly to pull him down. "Elias, we don't have time for this." "Almost there." Elias slammed his fist down on the final command, and the entire colony shuddered. Lights flickered, doors slammed shut, and life support systems powered down. A silence followed, heavier than any battle cry. "They can't fight in the dark," Harlock said, realization dawning on him. "Exactly," Elias smirked. "Let's finish this." The colony lay in a tense, eerie silence, broken only by the distant hum of failing machinery and the occasional creak of settling debris. With the command core disabled, the Rilgath forces were cut off from their centralized power, their once iron grip now reduced to a scattered, disoriented force. Elias, Harlock, and Kelly stood at the heart of it all, the weight of their journey etched into their faces, but determination still burned in their eyes. They had fought harder than they ever imagined possible, and now the end was in sight. "This isn't over yet," Elias said, wiping grime from his face. "They'll regroup. They always do." Harlock placed a firm hand on Elias's shoulder, his reptilian eyes reflecting a newfound sense of pride. "No. This time, they won't. We've shown them that we are more than slaves. We are free. And we will fight to stay that way." The remaining Rilgath, sensing their inevitable defeat, scrambled with scattered assaults and desperate pleas for reinforcements that would never come. The Trithan, once broken and subjugated, now stood united in purpose. Each victory, each hard-won step forward, had shaped them into a force beyond what they once believed possible. As the final skirmishes ended, a solemn quiet settled over the colony. The rebellion had succeeded, but the cost was high. Fallen comrades were mourned, and scars, both physical and emotional, would take time to heal. Elias gathered the survivors, standing before them with an expression both determined and reflective. "Freedom isn't just breaking chains," he said. "It's about taking responsibility and shaping the future with it. It's about standing together, rebuilding, and never letting fear control you again. We didn't just fight to escape, we fought to create something better." Harlock stepped forward, his voice strong yet tinged with sadness. "Our people have lived under the shadow of oppression for so long, we forgot what it meant to hope. Today, we remember. And tomorrow, we rebuild." Kelly, standing beside them, nodded. "The Rilgath underestimated us, and that's their greatest failure. They thought strength was in domination, but we proved it's in unity. in resilience. Now in control of their destiny, the Trithan embarked on the challenging task of reconstructing their home, pouring hope into every repaired wall and restored passage. Walls were mended, tunnels reinforced, and plans drafted for a future free from fear. Elias and his team helped where they could, but they knew their mission here was coming to an end. The Trithan no longer needed saviors, they had become their own. As they prepared to leave, Harlock met Elias at the docking bay, a small, worn emblem in his hand. "Take this," he said. "A reminder of what you helped us achieve." Elias took the token, nodding. "You don't need us anymore, Harlock. You never did. You just needed to believe." With one final handshake, the humans departed, leaving behind a colony no longer bound by fear, but fueled by hope. As their ship lifted off, Kelly glanced out the viewport at the bustling efforts below. "Think they'll make it?" she asked. Elias offered a reflective smile. "They've found their strength. They don't need us anymore." The moral was clear: true strength isn't in brute force, but in unity, in resilience, and in the courage to seize freedom when the opportunity arises. Oppression may come in many forms, but it is in the unbreakable bonds of hope and determination that true liberation is found. And as the stars stretched out before them, Elias knew that the fight for freedom was never truly over, but in this corner of the galaxy, at least, it had found a foothold.